The principal leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, completely certain of himself. On the other side of that desk sat a 12-year-old black boy, spine straight, jaw tight, eyes glassy, but refusing to let a single tear fall in front of the man who had just decided his guilt before asking a single question. The watch was right there on the desk, silver, rectangular, someone else's name engraved on the back, and Jordan Hayes had never touched it. "You are suspended," the principal said, with the calm of a man who has never once had to wonder whether the room was built for him. "And depending on what our investigation finds, we may be talking about expulsion." Jordan said nothing. Because what do you say when the verdict comes before the trial? What do you say when you are 12 years old, sitting in a school that costs more per semester than most people make in a year, and the only evidence against you is the word of a boy whose family's name is on the gymnasium wall? He turned the small leather bracelet on his wrist, the one with the gold dragon charm, and he waited. 42 minutes later, the front door of Westbrook Academy opened, and every single person in that reception area stopped breathing at exactly the same moment. He was tall. He was Korean. He wore a black bespoke suit that cost more than the principal's monthly salary. A dragon tattoo climbed the right side of his neck in black and red ink. And he walked across that floor like a man who has never once in his life needed anyone to move out of his way, because they always did. He stopped in front of the boy. "You okay?" "I didn't do anything, Dad." "I know." No pause, no let's hear both sides, just, "I know." And before you watch what happened next inside that office, before you see what a Korean Mafia boss does when someone puts their hands on his son's future, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and help our channel. Because this story, it is just getting started. The fluorescent lights of Westbrook Academy hummed above Jordan Hayes like a verdict waiting to be read aloud. He sat on the hard wooden bench outside the principal's office with his spine perfectly straight, his mochila resting on his lap, and his fingers turning the small leather bracelet around and around his wrist, the one with the tiny gold dragon charm that his father had clasped there 3 birthdays ago, saying nothing. Which was how Kwon Jae-sung always said the most important things. The hallway smelled like floor wax and old ambition. Around him, the school moved the way it always moved. Lockers opening, sneakers squeaking, voices rising and falling in that particular frequency of 12 and 13-year-olds who have not yet learned to modulate what they feel. But something was different today. The students who passed the bench slowed down just slightly. They looked. They whispered behind palms and notebook covers, the way people look at a car accident or a fire. Not because they want to help, but because something primal in them needs to witness. Jordan did not look back at any of them. He had learned that, too. Inside the office, through the thick door with the frosted glass panel that read, "Richard Calloway, Principal," in gold adhesive letters, he could hear the low murmur of a conversation he was not invited to participate in. Tyler Morrison's voice, high, confident, unhurried. And then Mr. Calloway's voice layering over it, the tone of a man who had already made up his mind and was now simply gathering the paperwork to support the conclusion he had arrived at before the evidence. Jordan turned the bracelet once more. He thought about the morning. He had arrived at school at 7:43, same as always, through the east entrance, because the west entrance had a broken step that no one had fixed in 4 months, and he had learned to route himself around it. He had gone to his locker. He had taken out his history textbook and his notebook, the one with the dark blue cover and the corner bent from where he had dropped it on the bus 2 weeks ago. He had walked to class. He had sat in his seat. He had listened. He had not gone anywhere near Tyler Morrison's locker. He had not touched Tyler Morrison's mochila. He had not seen Tyler Morrison's silver rectangular watch, the one with Morrison engraved on the back in capital letters, until it appeared on Mr. Calloway's desk like evidence planted so neatly it almost looked rehearsed. The thing was, Jordan was not surprised. That was the part that sat heaviest in his chest, not the accusation itself, not the indignity of being walked out of class by Mr. Greer while 30 pairs of eyes burned into his back. Not even the particular way Mr. Calloway had folded his hands on the desk before beginning to speak, with the careful patience of someone performing fairness rather than practicing it. The heaviest part was that none of it surprised him. There had been other moments, smaller ones, the kind that do not make it into any report or official record because they happen in the space between what is said and what is meant. A question repeated to him that had already been asked to the class. A grade returned with a comment that seemed written for someone who needed more explaining. A group project where his name appeared last on the presentation slide, beneath 3 other names in a slightly smaller font. And when he mentioned it, someone said, "Oh, I didn't even notice," in a way that made it very clear they had. He had catalogued all of it, filed it somewhere deep, the way his father had taught him to file things that he could not yet use. "Guarda tutto," his father had said once in the kitchen, very late, when Jordan had come home with something on his face that Jason had recognized without needing to be told what happened. Process it. Decide with a cold head. Jordan pressed his thumb against the small gold dragon on his wrist. Outside the frosted glass door, Mr. Calloway's phone rang. Jordan heard him answer, heard him deliver the summary of the situation in his formal voice, the one that turned every sentence into a policy statement. Heard the brief silence that followed when whoever was on the other end of the line responded. And then he heard the call end. 42 minutes, he thought. That was how long it would take. He knew because he had once timed it. The drive from his father's office building to the school on a Thursday afternoon, in moderate Los Angeles traffic. He straightened his blazer, adjusted the strap of his mochila, and waited. The 42 minutes passed the way long silences pass. Not quickly, not slowly, but with a weight that made every second feel like something being decided somewhere else. Jordan watched the second hand on the clock above the secretary's desk. Mrs. Patton had not looked at him directly since he had been brought to the bench. She shuffled papers. She typed things that did not require typing. She answered a phone call about a cafeteria delivery in a voice 3 notes higher than her normal voice, which meant she was uncomfortable, which meant she was aware of him sitting there, which meant the discomfort was specific. He turned the bracelet. The east hallway emptied as the next period began. The squeaking sneakers disappeared. The whispers dissolved. What remained was the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant sound of a teacher's voice rising and falling behind a closed classroom door, and the particular silence of an institution that has already decided something and is now simply waiting for the paperwork to agree. Then the front entrance opened. Mrs. Patton's typing stopped. Not gradually, not as a natural pause, It stopped the way sound stops when something interrupts the frequency. Immediate, total, involuntary. Jordan did not turn his head. He did not need to. He felt the change in the room, the way you feel a drop in temperature before you see the clouds. And he exhaled once, slowly, through his nose. And the tightness that had lived behind his sternum for the last 42 minutes loosened by precisely 1 degree. The footsteps moved across the reception floor without hurry. Each one landed with the full weight of a man who had never learned to make himself smaller in a room, and had no intention of starting. Kwon Chae-sung stopped beside the bench. Jordan looked up. His father was looking at him with those dark, still eyes that other people spent entire meetings trying to read and almost never could. But Jordan had spent 12 years learning that particular language. And what he read now was not anger, not worry, not the performance of concern that adults sometimes put on for the benefit of being seen caring. What he read was simpler and more absolute than any of those things. I see you. I know. I'm here. You okay? His father asked. The words were plain. The voice was quiet. I'm good, Jordan said. But I didn't do anything, Dad. I know, Chae-sung said. No pause. No, let's hear both sides. No, I'm sure there's an explanation. Just 2 words delivered with the same certainty with which he might state that the sky was above them and the ground was below. Mrs. Patton appeared at the edge of the inner office doorway, holding a manila folder she had no reason to be holding, her knuckles slightly pale around it. Mr. Kwon? Director Calloway will see you now. Chae-sung adjusted the single button of his jacket. He looked at Jordan once more. A look that said, stay, be still. This is mine to handle. And walked through the door. Inside, Richard Calloway rose from his chair with the automatic courtesy of a man who had performed this gesture thousands of times, extending his hand across the wide mahogany desk with the practiced confidence of someone who had never once walked into a room and doubted his own authority in it. Jae-sung looked at the extended hand, not with hostility, with the calm, complete disinterest of a man who has decided that this particular ritual is not necessary today. He sat down. Calloway sat down. The Mont Blanc pen in the director's breast pocket caught the light from the window behind him. The one good item in a room full of furniture chosen for impression rather than quality. Jae-sung registered it without expression, and registered also the slightly loosened knot of the wine-colored tie, the barely there tremor in the way Calloway relaced his fingers on the desk surface, the micro-adjustment of posture that people make when they realize, too late, that the meeting they prepared for is not the meeting that is actually happening. Thank you for coming in so quickly, Calloway began. We have a serious situation involving your son and a fellow student. Tyler Morrison, Jae-sung said. Calloway paused. Yes, that's correct. Son of Brian Morrison, Morrison Capital, lead donor to the Westbrook Physical Renovation Fund, fiscal year before last. Jae-sung said it the way someone reads coordinates from a map. Not as accusation, not as threat, simply as the establishment of geography. This is where we are. $340,000. Public foundation filings. The director's fingers tightened fractionally against each other. The family's relationship with the school isn't relevant to the situation at hand. It isn't relevant yet, Jae-sung said. Tell me what happened. Calloway told him. He used the words he had prepared. Protocol, integrity, serious allegation. the Academy's responsibility. He placed each word carefully, the way a man places stepping stones across water he is not certain will hold his weight. He mentioned the watch. He mentioned Tyler's statement. He mentioned the decision to suspend Jordan pending further investigation, with expulsion as a possible outcome. Throughout all of it, Jae-sung did not move. He did not shift in the chair. He did not uncross his arms or change his expression. He simply listened, with the full, undivided, slightly terrifying attention of a man who is not listening for the content of what is being said, but for everything that surrounds it. When Calloway finished, the silence lasted 4 seconds. Then Jae-sung placed his phone on the desk. On the screen, a still image, time-stamped, from a security camera. Corridor B, East Wing, 10:17 in the morning. Jordan Hayes, standing at the water fountain, backpack on both shoulders, alone, facing away from the direction of any classroom. "This is the time Tyler Morrison identified," Jae-sung said. "This is where my son was." Calloway stared at the image. "That could be... Your building has 23 security cameras," Jae-sung said. "I know this because I asked the right person before I walked through your front door." He let that sit for exactly 1 second. "I would strongly suggest that before any document with my son's name on it is signed, you request the official footage from your own system." Calloway opened his mouth. He closed it. The fluorescent light above them hummed the same way the one in the hallway hummed. Indifferent, continuous, revealing. What Richard Calloway did next would define the remainder of his career at Westbrook Academy, though he did not know that yet. He picked up his desk phone. He dialed the extension for building security, the internal line, the one that connected to the monitoring room on the basement level where a contracted security officer named Pete spent his shifts watching 16 screens and drinking bad coffee from a thermos. Calloway asked, in his most measured, administrative voice, for the corridor footage from that morning. He asked for the timestamp range. He asked Pete to pull it up on the main monitor and to flag anything relevant from the East Wing between 9:45 and 10:30. Pete said he would call back in 10 minutes. Jae-sung said nothing during this. He sat in the chair with his hands resting on his knees and his eyes on the middle distance, the way a man sits when he is not waiting, but simply existing in a space until the space catches up to what he already knows. Calloway set the phone down and attempted to fill the silence. "I want you to understand that this school takes every allegation with equal seriousness, regardless of—" "Jordan has been a student here for 2 years, Jae-sung said, without looking at him. In those 2 years, his grade point average has been 3.8. He has had no disciplinary incidents, no tardiness record, no complaints filed." A pause. "I review his file quarterly." Calloway blinked. "You review his file?" "Quarterly." Jae-sung looked at him now. "Is that unusual to you?" The director did not answer that. "There was another student," Jae-sung continued. "Isaiah Thompson, 10 years old. He was brought into this office 14 months ago with an allegation that was also not verified before action was taken. His family did not pursue the matter formally." Another pause, shorter this time. "I am not Isaiah's father, but I know his father, and I know what it cost him to decide not to pursue it." The room was very quiet. "How do you know about that case?" Calloway asked. His voice had lost the administrative texture entirely. What remained was something rawer and less rehearsed. "Because people talk to me," Jae-sung said simply. when they feel they have no other options. The phone on the desk rang. Calloway answered it, listened. His face moved through several expressions in the space of 30 seconds. Confusion, then a particular blankness that was not calm, but was the thing the body does when it needs a moment before it can process what calm will eventually feel like on the other side of something terrible. He set the phone down with the care of a man setting down something fragile. The corridor footage confirms Jordan's location, he said. Yes, Jae-sung said. He was at the water fountain at 10:17. Yes. Which means he wasn't. Calloway stopped, started again. There's a discrepancy between the timestamp and Tyler's account. There is more than a discrepancy, Jae-sung said. Pete also pulled the footage from the men's changing room adjacent to the gymnasium. I asked him to, before I came upstairs. He reached over and turned his phone face up on the desk again. A second image. The changing room. Tyler Morrison, alone, opening a side compartment of his own bag, placing a silver rectangular watch inside it, and then zipping the compartment closed with the brisk efficiency of someone completing a task. Tyler Morrison was not robbed this morning. Tyler Morrison hid his own watch. And then he told you who to call into this office. Calloway looked at the image for a long time. The Mont Blanc pen in his pocket had stopped catching the light. Or perhaps the light had simply shifted, the way afternoon light shifts in Los Angeles when the marine layer begins its slow daily reclamation of the sky. Mr. Calloway, Jae-sung said, and now his voice dropped by half a register, which made it not louder, but more present, more filling of the available space, the way low notes on a piano fill a room differently than high ones. I am going to ask you one question. I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. Calloway looked at him. If the student who had been brought into this office today were not Jordan, if it were any other student, with any other family, and the only evidence you had was the word of a boy whose last name appears on the gymnasium wall, would you have made the same decision? The silence that followed was not comfortable, and was not meant to be. It was the kind of silence that has a shape. It pressed against the walls of the office, and against the space between the two men, and against the frosted glass door with the gold adhesive letters, and against the corridor beyond it, where Jordan Hayes sat on a hard wooden bench with his spine straight and his fingers turning a small leather bracelet around and around his wrist. Calloway did not answer the question, which was, of course, its own answer. Jason stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the director with the expression of a man who has received the information he came for and has now decided what to do with it. Call Jordan in, he said, and call Tyler Morrison's parents. Today, before the end of the school day. It was not a request. It was not delivered as a request. And Calloway reached for the intercom button with the hands of a man who understood, finally and completely, the difference. The door opened, and Jordan walked in the way he had walked out of his classroom 2 hours earlier. Spine straight, chin level, the bracelet turning once around his wrist before his hand dropped to his side. He looked at his father first, then at Mr. Calloway, then at the phone on the desk, face up, with the image still visible on the screen. And he understood everything in the way that 12-year-olds understand things when they have been paying careful attention to the world for long enough. Not through explanation, but through the accumulation of detail, the way a picture develops not all at once, but gradually, shape by shape, until the whole thing is simply there and undeniable. Calloway stood. He stood the way men stand when they have been reduced to the oldest and most basic social mechanism available to them. The physical acknowledgement that the person across from them deserves to be met at eye level. He straightened his tie with one hand, the loose knot tightening fractionally, as if the gesture might restore something that had already left the room entirely. "Jordan," he said. The administrative texture was completely gone now. What remained was a man's voice, unguarded, slightly hollowed out. "The footage from our security system has confirmed that you were not in the area Tyler described at the time he described. The suspension is canceled, effective immediately. There will be no further action taken against you, and no record of today's events will appear in your academic file." Jordan looked at him. He did not say anything right away. He let the words land and settle the way his father had taught him to let things land, without rushing toward them, without rushing away from them. He had spent the better part of a morning sitting on a hard bench outside this office, turning a bracelet around his wrist and holding something together inside himself that had wanted very badly to come apart. And now the man who had set all of that in motion was standing behind his mahogany desk, apologizing with the careful economy of someone who was sorry for the consequence of being caught, rather than sorry for the act itself. Jordan understood that distinction too. "Okay," he said. Calloway blinked. He had perhaps expected more. Tears or relief, or the particular brightness that crosses a child's face when an adult admits a wrong. He did not get any of those things. He got 2 letters delivered without tremor by a 12-year-old boy who had decided somewhere in the course of that long hallway walk that his dignity was not going to be contingent on this moment going any particular way. Jae-sung put his hand on his son's shoulder. Not heavily, just present. The way the dragon term on the bracelet was present. Small, specific, and absolutely certain of what it meant. "There is one more thing," Jae-sung said, looking at Calloway. "Isaiah Thompson, 10 years old. He was a 5th grade student here 14 months ago. He was brought into this office with an unverified allegation, and his family was not given the same standard of investigation that a verified security system would have provided." He paused. "I want a formal written apology from this institution delivered to that family within the week. I want it signed by you, personally, not by the school's legal representative." Calloway opened his mouth. "I also want," Jae-sung continued, without raising his voice, without changing his expression, with the same flat and irresistible calm that had defined every sentence he had spoken since walking through the door. "A revised disciplinary protocol submitted to the school board within 30 days. One that requires camera verification before any suspension or expulsion proceeding involving allegations of theft. For every student, regardless of whose name is on the gymnasium wall." The last sentence landed the way certain sentences land. Not with volume, but with mass, pressing down on everything beneath it until the shape of the room is slightly different than it was before. Calloway sat down slowly. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen. He pulled a yellow legal pad from the side drawer, and he began to write. They walked out through the reception area side by side, Jordan half a step to his father's left, and Mrs. Patton watched them go with the expression of someone who has witnessed something she will be thinking about for a long time, without being entirely sure what to call it. The manila folder was still in her hands. She had never found a reason to open it. The east hallway was between periods again. The lockers were open. The voices were rising and falling. The sneakers were squeaking against the waxed floor. The corridor did what it always did when Jordan moved through it. It went slightly quieter, the awareness spreading outward from his position like a slow ripple across still water. But something had shifted. It was not dramatic. It was not the parting of a crowd or the sudden recognition of something that had always been there. It was smaller than that and more durable. The way certain changes happen, not with announcement, but with the quiet permanence of a thing that has simply become true, and will remain true regardless of whether anyone marks the moment. A girl Jordan recognized from his history class looked up from her locker as they passed. She met his eyes. She did not look away. She gave him the small, specific nod that means, "I see what happened, and I know what it means." The kind of nod that costs something to give, and is worth something to receive. Jordan nodded back. Outside, the Rolls-Royce was where it had been left. Black, still. The two men beside it straightening almost imperceptibly as the doors of the school opened. The afternoon Los Angeles light fell across the steps in long, warm panels. The marine layer not yet arrived. The sky, the particular shade of blue that only exists at this hour in this city. Clean and enormous, and indifferent to everything happening beneath it. Jordan stopped at the top of the steps. "She nodded at me," he said. Not to anyone in particular. Not quite to his father. Just aloud. Because some things need to be said outside the body before they can be properly understood. Jae-sung stopped beside him. He looked out at the parking lot, at the line of cars, at the afternoon light stretching itself across the asphalt. "People notice more than they say," he said. "Most of them are waiting to see what you do before they decide what they do." Jordan thought about that. "Is that why you didn't yell at him?" he asked. "Calloway. Yelling costs you the room," Jae-sung said. "Evidence keeps it." They stood there for another moment. The way people stand at the top of steps when they are not quite ready to descend, when the moment at the top still has something left in it worth staying for. Then Jordan reached up and touched the small gold dragon on his wrist. Once, briefly. He walked down the steps. His father walked beside him. 3 days later, a formal communication went out to every family in the Westbrook Academy system. A revised disciplinary protocol. Camera verification required. Signed by Richard Calloway. The language was institutional, carefully worded, stripped of anything that might read as admission. But the families who read it carefully, and some of them read it very carefully, understood what it meant, and what it had taken to produce it. The following week, a letter arrived at the Thompson family's home. Handwritten signature at the bottom. Westbrook Academy letterhead. Isaiah Thompson's mother read it twice at the kitchen table, and then set it down and did not pick it up again for several hours. Because some things need time before you can decide what you feel about receiving them. Tyler Morrison served a 2-week suspension. When he returned, the smartwatch was gone from his wrist. Whether this was a consequence or simply a choice, no one said. And Jordan Hayes went back to the third bench from the left in his history class, opened his dark blue notebook to a fresh page, and picked up his pen. The corridor still went slightly quieter when he moved through it. But he did not adjust his pace for it anymore. He did not adjust anything. He walked the way his father walked. Not fast, not slow, not performing anything for anyone. With the full and unhurried weight of a person who has decided, in the permanent and unannounced way that real decisions get made, exactly who he is, and exactly what that is worth. Which, it turned out, was more than enough. Jordan walked out of that school the same boy who walked in. Same spine, same bracelet, same eyes. But something had shifted, quietly, permanently, the way real things shift. So let me ask you something before you go. How many Jordans never had someone walk through that door for them? How many times has a verdict been delivered before the evidence was even looked at, and no one said a word because the wrong name was on the wall? And what does it actually mean to protect someone? Not with noise, not with anger, but with truth, patience, and the willingness to stay in the room. Think about that. Jordan's father entered the room with conviction, calmly, and with absolute certainty about his son's worth. He didn't apply himself, not significant. He didn't negotiate, and that child left with his dignity intact. Now I ask you, is there someone in your life who enters the room for you like that? Because many women have spent years waiting for someone to confirm their worth, and they've been adjusting, shrinking, explaining themselves, while their dignity silently faded away. The Woman He Can't Manipulate is the 30-day reset created for women who have decided to be the Jae-sung of their own story. Not the one who waits to be defended, the one who never needs to be diminished again. The link is in the QR code on the screen now, or in the description, or in the first pinned comment. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And we will see you in the next one.